إمامين همامين سعيدين شهيدين أبي محمد الحسن وأبي عبد الله الحسين وعلى أمهما سيدة نساء فاطمة الزهراء وعلى عميه الشريفين المطهرين من الأدناس الحمزة والعباس وعلى ستة الباقية من العشرة المبشرة وسائر الصحابة والتابعين رضوان الله تعالى عليهم أجمعين. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعنا وإياكم الآيات والذكر الحكيم. Alhamdulillah, inshallah, today we will be looking at the farewell sermon of the Prophet ﷺ and some of the lessons that we can derive from there. So in the time that I have today, I would like to share with you 5 key lessons or messages that we can take away from the final khutbah of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, before we talk about this, you may see that when you hear people share with you the final sermon, sometimes there can be certain counsels that are being given in the sermon different from the narrations that you read. Now, an important point to mention here, this isn't a contradiction. The final sermon was one sermon, of course, but some of the ulama, they mention some of the reasons why one sahabi may mention something and another may miss that out or include that, is because they may have wrote what they heard. And others may not have remembered something, or they may have just wrote down what they consider to be the main points. So it's important to remember that there's no contradiction. So inshallah, what I'll be sharing with you today, the 5 main points, is a culmination of all of the various narrations and what we can take away from there. So the first point is to remember that this farewell sermon we have, if you were to ever say, let's summarize Islam in one khutbah, this is a perfect summary of that. If you wanted to share with a fellow non-Muslim something about Islam that they can just read, that has all the main points, this farewell sermon is perfect for that. And we know that the stances that have been mentioned in this khutbah are those that are in line with the completion of Islam. What does that mean? So we know that at this time, then ayah was also revealed in the Quran, where it was mentioned that today I have perfected for you your religion and completed my blessing upon you and approved for you Islam as your religion. So what is mentioned over here, because certain things in Islam at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they may have been abrogated, or certain things were permissible and then they were changed, and changes occurred during that time. But at this time when the Prophet ﷺ gave this khutbah, Islam was complete as a religion. So the first point which I would like you all to take away from today, from this final khutbah, what we can take is, number 1, is to uphold human dignity. Something we take away from this khutbah. To uphold human dignity. What does that mean? That we learn that to attain peace in our society, no one should have the intent to harm oneself. This is important as well, to harm oneself, especially in the time and age that we live in. To harm oneself and also to harm another as well. Or even trespass upon someone's rights. So not only harm, but harm itself can take place in various forms, as we're aware. Harm itself can be physical, verbal, mental, emotional. So if we read this on face value, you might think, okay, so that means that we're not going to physically harm someone. No, it's not just limited to that. In every single way possible, in our present people, it should be one that gives them comfort, gives them safety, gives them sakina. So where do we derive this from the final khutbah? When the Prophet ﷺ, in very plain language, he said, hurt no one. Hurt no one, and look at the response, so that no one may hurt you. So the reason is given straight away as well, that the Prophet ﷺ is showing this reciprocal relationship that we should have with other people, other inhabitants of this earth. And you know, but we know a step further than that. Idfa' billati hiya ahsan, is repel evil with goodness. But the baseline is what? Hurt no one, so that no one may hurt you. I'm sure you've all heard whenever Sheikh Ninawi comes, he always says that line, doesn't he? That if you're only good to those who are good to you, then what good are you? This is that principle. Hurt no one, so no one may hurt you. And so we see from there, number 1 is to uphold human dignity, a value for another person in every way possible, in their presence, in their existence. And when you start to do that in your personal relationship, flourish, and how much of an impact it has upon them. The Prophet ﷺ, one of the most beautiful traits about him was how when the companions radiallahu anhum would leave his companionship, leave his presence, how would they feel? They're like, yeah, he loves me the most. That's what the Prophet would make them feel. So much attention, due diligence, value. He would give each and every single person that would come into His presence. Just reflect and think that when we are talking to people, we're just physically talking, but our mind is elsewhere for them to finish. We don't give them that attention by purpose. But in order to, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in the Quran? That had you had been harsh-hearted, ghalidh al-qalb, what would have happened? Their hearts wouldn't have inclined towards you. To win the hearts of other people in our personal relationships, in our community, we need to first reflect upon how is our presence in person. So number one, to uphold human dignity. Lesson number two that we can take here is the honor and the respect and the rights of our women folk that has been given. Which again, without going into too much detail, you're aware of the context and where the Prophet ﷺ was. So the Prophet said in this final khutbah that, "O people, it is true," he's talking to the men, "it's true, there's a reality, it is haqq that you do have certain rights over your women. But remember this, that they also have rights over you as well." And the Prophet later mentioned that, remember that you have taken them as your wives only, but the condition is what? Reminding us to stay grounded or humble, that yes, you've done that, but you've only done that with Allah's trust and with His permission. So he said, "I enjoin you to treat women well and to be kind to them." We sometimes talk about women's rights. Let's bring it back down to basics. وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on that day on Yawm al-Qiyamah, the girls who are buried alive, they go to su'ilat, on that day they will be asked, بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. That for what crime was I slain? What crime was I killed? So Islam, not only did it come to give women their value and rights, but primarily it gave them life at a time when the mere existence of them was not being acknowledged by society. So that's a reminder to us to remember each and every single human being, let's go further, each and every single thing in existence has rights. Has rights. You have a right now. Your right is I give message, I give time, I'm over here. Every single time, place, person, object has hukuk. And I remember one of our teachers, he said to us that the first lesson he ever had from his teacher was Be'adab, Be'nasib. Ba'adab, Ba'nasib. That an individual who has adab and etiquette, his nasib, his destiny, of what he will gain out of it will be blessed. But if there's no adab and manners with that in the first place, he's never going to derive any benefit from that. So the first thing that we have with anything